Rancher lived alone for years, until he saved a wounded Bigfoot.
Is out there on
He'd
a
lived
night
alone
like
for
this.
years. Just a man, his cabin, and the wind. Most nights, the silence was his
My
only
lord,
friend.
what could
But
be
that
this
stormy
big?
evening, something knocked on his door.
Not a monster, it's in pain.
Not. He followed the prints through the snow and found it a giant wounded
Easy
creature
now.
hard in the
You'll
cold.
be all right.
Fear told him to run, but something deeper whispered help. So he did. By the fire's glow, man and beast shared the same breath, two souls lost in different
I've saved the
worlds,
wrong folks before,
finding each other
not
again.
this time.
Outside, unseen eyes watched. The forest held its breath. When dawn broke, they came dozens of towering shapes, standing silent in the snow. Not to harm, but to honor.
You'll be
As
fine,
the
old
sun
friend.
rose over the valley, the old rancher understood sometimes the wild doesn't test you to break you. It comes to
Wish I
remind
could
you
have
that you still
saved you.
have a heart. Before we begin, take a moment to comment the name of your city.
Something
where you
biggles
watch
in
from
these
today.
parts.
And when
We
the
take it
story
tonight.
ends, don't
It's
forget to rate
close.
it from
Don't
0
let
to
it
10.
run.
The wind was howling.
I
that
won't let
night,
them hurt
the
you.
kind that made the mountains tremble, and the old cabin walls whisper like ghosts. Jack Callahan sat by the fire, a glass of whiskey in his hand, watching the amber flame dance in the reflection of his tired eyes. For years, this was all he had known: the fire, the wind, and the silence that came after both. Outside, Montana's winter raged in white fury. Snow hammered the roof. The pines bent low. Every gust seemed to carry a voice from long ago, the echo of his son's laughter lost to a hunting accident.
Thank you
Since that day,
for
Jack had stopped speaking to
forgiveness.
God, to people, even to himself.
Sometimes the wild doesn't
Then
try to
3
hurt
heavy
us.
knocks,
It only mirrors
became
the parts
slow,
of us we tried to
solid.
forget.
each one cutting through the storm like a heartbeat against the void. Jack froze. The glass trembled in his hand. He set it down, reached for his lantern and rifle, and moved toward the door. The wind roared as he pulled it open, and the world turned to white. Snow whipped into the room, biting his skin, stinging his eyes. Through the blizzard, he saw it, a trail of blood across the porch, winding into the dark like a red thread. He stepped outside. The lantern flame flickered weakly against the gale. There on the ground was a footprint, massive, deep, almost human, but far too large. Another beside it, and another, leading into the woods. Jack's breath clouded in the cold as he followed. The snow crunched under his boots. Every sound vanished except the wind and his heartbeat. Then came the growl, low, guttural, and broken. He swung the lantern, and there it was. A giant shape half hidden by the storm, covered in dark matted hair, one leg twisted, blood seeping into the snow. The creature's chest rose and fell in uneven breaths. Its eyes glowed faintly in the light, not with rage but with pain. Jack's finger tightened on the trigger, then stopped. Something about those eyes. The way they trembled reminded him of his boy lying in the snow years ago. He lowered the rifle. Slowly he took off his coat and stepped closer. The creature flinched, but didn't attack. "It's all right," Jack whispered. "You're gonna be fine." He draped the coat over its shoulders and bent down beside it. The storm howled louder yet. For the first time in years, Jack's heart grew quiet. In that frozen wilderness, a lonely man chose mercy over fear, and that single choice to save a wounded beast would change everything. Part 1. The Wounded Giant. The cabin walls groaned as the storm raged on outside. Snow hissed against the windows, and the wind screamed down the chimney like a restless spirit searching for a way in. Inside, the world was smaller, warmer, and trembling. Jack Callahan knelt by the fire, feeding it one log at a time, watching the flames grow higher, painting his face in gold and shadow. Behind him, sprawled on the wooden floor, was the thing he'd dragged from the storm. It filled half the room, massive shoulders rising and falling, fur soaked and matted with blood, breath wheezing in broken rhythm. The smell of wet earth smoke and iron filled the cabin. Jack set his rifle aside, poured a little whiskey into a tin cup, and reached for the old medical kit he hadn't touched in years. His hand shook, not from fear, but memory. "Easy now," he murmured, his voice gravelly and low. "Let's see what we're dealing with." He tore a strip of cloth, soaked it in whiskey, and pressed it against the wound. The creature let out a deep, rumbling groan, a sound that filled the whole cabin, low and mournful like thunder rolling over the plains. Jack froze. He could feel the heat of its breath on his forearm, see the rise and fall of its chest. Its eyes opened amber under the lantern light. They weren't wild like he'd expected. They were tired, the same kind of tired he saw in the mirror every morning. The two stared at each other for a long moment, man and beast both wounded in different ways. Then Jack went back to work. He poured more whiskey, cleaned the wound again, biting his lip as the creature flinched but did not strike. Outside, lightning flashed through the cracks in the shutters, thunder shaking the rafters. Inside, the only sounds were breath, crackling fire, and the quiet murmur of a man who hadn't spoken to anyone in years. "Had this kit since the war," he muttered. "Didn't think I'd be using it on. Whatever the hell you are." He wrapped the leg in gauze, tying it firm but careful, then sat back on his heels, wiping sweat from his brow. The creature shifted its breathing, steadier now. It blinked slowly, watching him with something almost like curiosity. Jack poured himself a swallow of whiskey straight from the bottle. He looked at the creature and gave a half smile. "Hell, you earned one too." He poured a few drops into his palm and offered it. The creature sniffed, rumbled softly, then turned its head away. Jack chuckled. "Smart one, huh? Probably for the best." The fire popped, and for a moment the sound pulled him somewhere far away. Back to another cabin, another storm. A smaller hand clutching his blood seeping through a torn jacket, his son's voice faint, broken, calling, "Dad, it hurts," and the sound of his own voice hoarse and helpless. "Hold on, son. Please hold on." But the boy hadn't held on. No amount of fire prayer or whiskey could bring him back. Since that night, Jack had lived with the storm inside him, one that never passed. Now, looking at this wounded creature, he felt that storm shift. He saw the same trembling fear, not the fear of dying, but of being left alone to die. Jack swallowed hard and whispered more to himself than to it. "You don't deserve to die out here. I reckon I didn't either. But we both did anyway, didn't we?" The Bigfoot. The giant made a faint sound, something between a breath and a hum. Its chest rose deeper now, slower, and then slowly. It lifted its hand. A massive, rough, scarred hand, each finger thick as a branch. Jack tensed, unsure if it meant to strike. But the creature only reached forward and touched his hand. Just a brush. Barely there. Warm, heavy, deliberate. The world seemed to pause. Even the wind outside grew quiet, as if the mountains themselves were holding their breath. The fire's glow painted their faces one human one, not both marked by loss. And for a heartbeat, there was no difference between them. Jack didn't pull away. He let the creature's hand rest there until it slipped back, settling again against the floor. He whispered, "You're all right now. I got you." Outside, the storm still raged, but inside something softer stirred. A quiet understanding born not of words, but of survival. Two lives that shouldn't have crossed, and yet somehow needed to. Jack leaned back, staring into the fire. The creature's breathing deepened, steady as a sleeping child's. For the first time in years, he didn't feel the need to fill the silence. He let it be. As the fire dimmed, the shadows on the wall shifted and danced, the shape of a man beside the shape of a giant, flickering together in the same fragile light. Outside, snow still fell relentless, pure, eternal. But inside that tiny cabin, something ancient and forgotten was rekindled trust. And in the quiet warmth between two wounded souls, the long, cold winter of Jack Callahan's heart began slowly to thaw. Part 2. The Night of Whispers. The storm had passed, but the night still breathed with a cold, older than time. Snow lay deep against the cabin walls, and the fire burned low, a soft orange glow licking the shadows. Jack Callahan sat in the corner chair, his rifle resting across his knees. The creature slept near the hearth, its enormous body curled tight every breath, a rough tremor in the dark. Now and then it stirred, a deep, uneasy growl rumbling from somewhere deep in its chest. Jack poured himself another inch of whiskey. The bottle was half empty. The world outside was silent, too silent. Even the wind had stopped moving, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. He looked toward the window. Beyond the frost and fogged glass, the tree line was just a blur of black shapes. Still, something felt different, like he wasn't the only one watching tonight. Jack rose slow and careful and stepped toward the window. He kept the lantern low, the rifle ready. Out there between the trees, the snow shimmered faintly under the moon. And then movement. Not the flit of a bird or a deer. Something heavier. A rhythm, thud. Thud. Thud like massive feet moving through deep snow. Not one set of steps. Several. Jack's breath froze in his throat. He turned toward the fire. The creature's eyes snapped open, glowing softly alert, its ears twitching to the sound. It raised its head, listening. Then, with a low growl, it answered. It wasn't a threat. It was a call. A strange, low-frequency rumble that seemed to vibrate through the wooden floorboards. Jack felt it in his chest more than he heard it. And then outside, the steps stopped. Silence. Thick. Waiting. The creature slowly lowered its head again, eyes half closed. Whatever was out there had heard and understood. Jack sat back down, still watching the window. His pulse slowed, but his heart didn't. He'd seen a lot of things in his 52 years. War-death men turning on each other for less than a loaf of bread. But he'd never felt anything like this, the sense that he'd just been allowed to exist in the presence of something ancient and aware. He looked at the creature again. Its breathing had steadied the rise and fall, slow, heavy. The firelight painted it in shades of gold and shadow, the snow melting from its fur steaming softly in the warmth. Jack spoke quietly, more to fill the silence than anything. "You got family out there, don't you?" he murmured. The creature's ear flicked once, a small acknowledgement maybe. Jack chuckled bitterly. Figures, even beasts don't stay alone long. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, staring into the fire. For a long while he didn't speak. The only sound was the hiss of the logs and the occasional soft crack. Then, as if something inside him gave way, he began to talk, not to the creature, not even to himself, but to whatever part of the night was listening. You ever do something so wrong it eats at you, so bad you stop sleeping, stop talking, stop living. The creature didn't move. The cabin didn't either. But the air around him felt heavier, as if it could hear the confession. "I once shot a deer," Jack said. His voice was barely a whisper. Big one. Perfect shot, clean through the heart. He swallowed, eyes fixed on the flames. Didn't see the fawn behind her. Didn't see my boy neither, watching me from behind the tree. He thought she was running at him. Jack's voice cracked. He set the rifle aside and pressed his palms together, trembling. He pulled his gun too, and when she fell, he slipped on the ice. Gun went off. A long silence. Jack's breath came ragged, fogging the air. I buried him myself, right up the ridge. His mama left that spring. Can't say I blame her. He laughed once, dry and hollow. Hell, I left too, I guess. Just forgot to move my body. He looked up, eyes glinting in the firelight, wet with the kind of pain that never really dries. I've been waiting for something to take me ever since he whispered. Bear storm fever didn't matter. But somehow I'm still here. Guess that means something. The creature's eyes opened again. It shifted the wooden floor, creaking beneath its weight. Then it made that same low rumble, softer this time, almost comforting. Jack met its gaze. For a long moment they just looked at each other, two survivors bound by wounds no one else could see. "Maybe you get it," Jack said quietly. "Maybe you lost something too." The creature blinked slowly, its amber eyes steady, wise, unafraid. Outside, the forest sighed a long, low rustle like wind through tall grass. But Jack knew it wasn't the wind. He rose, moved to the window again, and looked out. The tree line shimmered faintly under the moonlight. Between the trunk's eyes, dozens of them, glowing faintly yellow-green gold, watching. Not moving, not threatening, just there. Jack's finger hovered over the trigger again, but something in his gut told him not to. He stepped back from the window, lowering the rifle. The creature stirred, then gave another low growl, longer this time. A signal, a wordless command. And then, as if the forest obeyed all those eyes, slowly blinked and disappeared. The night fell silent again. No wind, no movement. Only the quiet crackle of the dying fire and the echo of something ancient trust earned in a single breath. Jack sat back down, the rifle forgotten at his feet. He rubbed a hand over his face, exhaled slow. "Well," he said softly, "guess I ain't alone tonight after all." The creature closed its eyes again, the cabin filled with the rhythm of two steady breaths, one deep, one shallow, both real. Outside the forest whispered once more, not in fear but in acceptance, a sound older than any language, a song of the wild. Answering back. Part 3. The Hunters. Morning came slow and gray, like a secret too heavy for the light to carry. The storm had passed, leaving behind a world of silence. Snow stretched across the valley in smooth, unbroken sheets glittering under the pale sun. Jack Callahan stood on his porch coat pulled tight, watching the breath of the mountains rise in mist. His cabin creaked in the cold. The smell of smoke and pine hung thick in the air. Behind him inside, the creature still slept. Its chest rose and fell in heavy rhythm, the wound wrapped tight and clean. The fire had burned low, but warmth still lingered. Jack took a slow breath, ran a hand through his beard, and whispered to himself, "Guess we made it through the night, huh?" He turned to go back inside and froze. Far down the slope, cutting across the white horizon, 3 figures on horseback were moving through the snow. Dark shapes, guns slung over their shoulders. Hunters. His heart sank. He knew that kind of ride, steady searching, no talk, no hesitation. They were following a trail, and he already knew which one. He hurried inside. The creature stirred, head lifting slightly as Jack closed the door behind him. "Shh," Jack hissed softly, moving fast. "We got company." He crossed the room, grabbed a few blankets, and motioned toward the back door, a narrow wooden hatch leading into the small supply shed behind the cabin. It was cold and cramped, but hidden from the main room. The creature's golden eyes watched him, uncertain. Jack pointed again, whispering, "Back there. Quiet now. Don't make a sound." For a moment it didn't move. Then with a slow grunt, it pushed itself up, limping toward the back. Each step was heavy, leaving faint prints of blood on the floorboards. Jack helped it through the hatch, then pulled the old rug across it to hide the trapdoor. He threw a few logs onto the fire, grabbed his rifle, and sat down by the table just as the first knock came. 3 raps, sharp and certain. Jack's pulse hammered. He waited a beat before answering. When he opened the door, the cold rushed in, and so did 3 men. Their faces were raw from the wind eyes, narrow, scanning everything at once. The one in front, tall with a black coat and a scar across his cheek, nodded. "Morning, Callahan." Jack's mouth twitched. "Ain't much of a morning if you're riding this early." The man's eyes drifted past him into the cabin. "Tracks leading down from the ridge," he said. "Blood in the snow. Big prints. Real big." He paused, his voice low. "You see anything strange last night?" Jack met his gaze, steady, unreadable. "Only thing I saw," he said slowly, "was the wind trying to tear my roof off. You're welcome to take a look if you don't believe me." The man smirked, but his eyes didn't soften. He stepped inside, followed by the other 2, one younger, one older, both gripping their rifles tight. They scanned the walls, the floors, the corners. Jack leaned against the table, pretending calm. The fire popped behind him. "Coffee?" he asked. No one answered. The leader crouched, touching a damp spot near the door, melted snow and faint streaks of red. He looked up, eyes sharp. "Lot of blood for just wind and weather." Jack didn't flinch. "Cut my hand, splittin' kindlin'," he said flatly. "You ever try it at 50 below?" The man studied him a moment longer, then stood. His hand brushed the handle of his revolver just enough to be noticed. "Well," he said finally, "if you see something, big, hairy, bleedin', you let us know." He smiled without warmth. "Could be worth a fortune." Jack's jaw tightened. He looked at the man for a long second, then said quietly, "There's nothing worth more than leaving the woods in peace." The hunter chuckled. Funny thing coming from a man who spent half his life shooting it. Jack didn't respond. The silence stretched until the man finally tipped his hat. Let's move. Prince'll melt fast. The three of them stepped back into the snow boots, crunching horses snorting. Jack watched them mount and ride off toward the ridge, their torches cutting faint trails of smoke against the white horizon. He stood at the door until the sound of hooves faded. Only then did he let out the breath he'd been holding. He turned across the room and knelt beside the rug. Lifting it gently, he whispered, "They're gone." From the dark hatch, two amber eyes blinked up at him. Slowly, the creature emerged, hunched, cautious, its fur brushing the low ceiling. Jack smiled faintly. "Close call," he murmured. "Real close." The creature looked at him, head tilting slightly, a low sound vibrating in its chest, a question maybe. Jack sighed, sat back against the wall. "They'll be back," he said quietly. "Men like that don't stop easy." The creature blinked again, and in that simple motion, Jack felt something pass between them. Not fear, not dominance, trust. He reached out a hand, palm up. The creature hesitated, then placed its massive hand over his. For a brief moment, man and beast shared the same heartbeat. Then a sound split the quiet, a gunshot far off in the trees. Jack jerked upright. The creature's head snapped toward the window. Another shot, then another, echoing through the mountains like thunder. The hunters were firing at something, maybe a shadow, maybe nothing. Jack's jaw clenched. He grabbed his rifle, loaded it, then stopped. He looked at the creature wide-eyed, breathing hard. A memory flashed, his son frightened and small, clutching his hand before the shot that changed everything. Jack lowered the gun. He swallowed, voice rough with conviction. "No one's touching you," he whispered. "Not while I'm still breathing." He turned back to the window, the glow of the fire painting him in gold and ember red. Outside, the echo of the last gunshot faded into the snow, leaving the forest silent once more. And somewhere deep within that silence, the wild itself seemed to bow, acknowledging the man who had chosen mercy over fear. Jack stood there a long time, the rifle resting against his shoulder, the fire burning steady behind him, and the promise hanging in the air like prayer. "No one will hurt you, I swear it before God." Part 4. The Tribe's Dawn. The night gave way to dawn, slow and reverent, like the world itself was holding a breath before speaking again. The storm had broken hours ago, and now the forest exhaled a mist that hung over the ground in soft white sheets. Snow melted from the cabin roof, dripping in steady rhythm, tick-tick-tick, the heartbeat of a new morning. Jack Callahan had not slept. He sat by the fire until the first hint of gold touched the frosted window pane. Beside him, the wounded giant stirred. Its chest rose with deeper, stronger breaths. The bleeding had stopped. The bandages were dark but dry. Jack rubbed his tired eyes and spoke softly. "Sun's up, big fella. You made it." The creature blinked its amber eyes, reflecting the firelight. Then it moved slow, deliberate, until it sat upright. Jack could hear the low creak of the floorboards beneath its weight. Outside, something shifted in the air. Not the wind, something heavier. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was aware. Jack stood walking to the door. A strange calm ran through him, the kind that comes before revelation. He reached for the latch and opened the door, and the world changed. The morning light spilled in cold and golden, washing the room in brilliance. Beyond the porch, stretching across the clearing, stood shapes, dozens of them, tall, still, silent. They surrounded the cabin in a wide circle, massive forms covered in fur that shimmered under the sun, their eyes catching the light like burning amber. The Bigfoot tribe. Jack froze. His hand still clutched the doorframe, but his breath caught somewhere in his chest. They were everywhere, males, females, even smaller ones half their height, each one standing motionless watching him. No weapons, no growls, just presence. Behind him, a low sound stirred a voice he recognized. The wounded one. The creature rose slowly, limping one hand on the wall for balance. Jack turned to steady it, instinctively reaching out. Its massive arm draped across his shoulders, the weight nearly folding him, but he held firm. Together they stepped outside into the snow. The cold bit through Jack's boots, but he hardly felt it. The air shimmered with breath, his and theirs, dozens of steaming clouds rising into the dawn. At the far end of the circle, one figure moved forward. It was taller than the rest, broader through the shoulders, its fur gleaming white like untouched snow. Its eyes were pale silver, calm and endless. The elder. Jack could feel it, the power, the wisdom in its stillness. This was no wild animal. This was something older than fear. The elder stopped a few paces away. Then, in a slow and deliberate motion, it placed one hand on its chest and bowed its head. The others followed. Dozens of arms, thick, powerful, covered in coarse fur, came up in unison, palms pressed to hearts. The sound of their movement filled the clearing, a soft, collective rustle like the wings of great birds in slow flight. Jack stood frozen, his heart pounding in his ears. He looked up at the white giant, saw the scar on its brow, the calm in its eyes, and felt his throat tighten. He knew what this was. It wasn't threat. It was gratitude. The wounded creature beside him growled softly, not with anger, but reverence. Then it placed its own hand to its chest. The motion was slow, shaking, but proud. Jack understood. He swallowed hard. His vision blurred. He raised his hand, calloused, trembling, and placed it over his heart. Then, with a breath that trembled like the wind itself, he bowed. The circle remained still. Only the sun moved, creeping higher, spilling golden light across the white field. Tears burned in his eyes. For the first time in years, Jack felt the weight inside him shift, the years of guilt, the endless silence, as if some unseen hand had lifted it from his soul. He whispered, voice breaking, "Thank you." No one answered. No one needed to. The elder stepped closer, eyes meeting his deep, knowing infinite. Then it turned, reaching into the snow at its feet. When it rose again, something small rested in its palm, a ring of stones woven tightly with grass and twine, and at its center a single silver feather. It walked forward, slow and deliberate. Jack didn't move. When the elder stopped before him, it held the token out. Jack extended both hands, palms up. The elder placed the gift into them with a care that felt almost human. The stones were warm, as though they carried the memory of the fire that had once saved one of their own. The feather shimmered faintly in the light. Jack's voice was barely a whisper. "What is this?" But before the words could finish, the elder lifted its hand again, pressed it to its heart, and gave a small, solemn nod. Around them, the circle began to move. Each creature, one by one, placed a hand to its chest, bowed toward Jack, and let out a deep, resonant hum that rolled through the valley like thunder. It wasn't noise, it was ceremony. The air vibrated. The snow itself seemed to tremble with the sound. And as the sun climbed higher, the clearing filled with golden mist, a vision of peace, ancient and pure. Jack stood in the center, eyes, wet, heart full. He looked at the wounded one beside him, now standing tall, steady again. Their eyes met. No words passed, but everything was said. Then, as quietly as they had come, the tribe began to fade back into the forest. One by one, their shapes disappeared into the mist, giants returning to legend. Only the elder lingered a moment longer. It turned once more to Jack, its silver eyes soft, and gave a final nod. Then it too vanished into the trees. Silence fell. Only the soft hum of the forest remained, the wind through pine needles, the drip of melting snow. Jack looked down at the token in his hands, the ring of stones, the feather gleaming like morning light. He clutched it to his chest, whispering, "Guess even the wild knows how to say thank you." He stood there for a long time, bathed in the golden glow, the snow melting beneath his boots. The air was cold, but inside him, for the first time in decades, something was warm again. Forgiveness. Real, living forgiveness. And as the mist lifted over the mountains, the cabin behind him shimmered in the sunrise, no longer just a place of loneliness, but a sanctuary touched by the sacred. Part 5. The Silent Promise. The forest was still again, the kind of stillness that comes not from emptiness, but from peace. The tribe had gone, their tracks already filling with new snow, their shapes swallowed by the trees and the mist that now shimmered gold beneath the rising sun. Jack Callahan sat on the porch of his cabin, elbows on his knees, the token resting in his hands. The ring of stones and silver feather caught the morning light, glowing softly, like it was made of something more than earth and sky. The world felt different, lighter somehow, as if a long-forgotten weight had finally been lifted from his shoulders. Even the wind had changed. It no longer howled through the trees. It breathed gentle, alive. Jack took a slow breath, tasting the air clean and sharp with pine. A long moment passed before he spoke, voice low and thoughtful. "Guess this is it," he murmured. The wild finally spoke back. He turned the token over in his palm, tracing the twine, the smooth edges of the stones. For the first time in years, his hands weren't shaking. He felt steady, grounded. The wounded giant was gone, but its scent still lingered in the cabin. So did the warmth of its presence, the echo of its breathing, the quiet patience that had filled that small wooden room. Jack smiled faintly. He reached for a scrap of wood, an old pine plank from the firewood pile, and his hunting knife. Slowly he began to carve. Each stroke was careful, deliberate, almost reverent. When he was done, the words were simple, uneven, but true, forgiven by the wild. He set the carving beside the token on the step, wiped the sawdust from his hands, and leaned back against the railing. Sunlight crept through the trees, touching the mountains with a pale gold glow. The snow at the edges of the clearing began to melt, tiny streams trickling down toward the valley below. Somewhere in the distance, a horse whinnied his old mare Belle, trotting up from the lower field, breath steaming in the cool air. Jack chuckled softly. "'Bout time you showed up, girl." She came close, nudging his shoulder, her dark eyes calm and kind. He stroked her muzzle, feeling the warmth of life under his palm. A bird landed on the porch rail, a small mountain jay, feathers the color of dusk. It tilted its head at him, chirped once, and flew off into the forest. Everything was awake again. Everything was alive. Jack sat there a long time listening. The forest didn't feel empty anymore. It felt full. Every creak of a branch, every sigh of wind through the pines, it all carried meaning. And somewhere beneath the steady rhythm of nature, he thought he heard it, that low, distant hum he'd heard the night before. The sound of giants singing from far away. A song without words. A song of thanks. Jack closed his eyes. He could almost see them, the elder with the white fur, the wounded one standing proud beside him, their silhouettes fading into the mist like ghosts returning home. And behind them, smaller ones, young, curious, watching, learning what mercy looked like. He smiled through the ache in his chest. "Take care of him," he whispered to the wind. "He's got a good heart." The air shifted. A breeze rolled through the clearing, cool and soft, carrying the faintest echo of a deep, rumbling tone like thunder miles away. It vibrated through the trees, through the cabin walls, through him. Jack laughed quietly. "That's a yes, huh?" He leaned back, letting the sun warm his face. The light hit the carving at his feet, making the words glow faintly against the grain of the wood. Forgiven by the wild. For the first time in a decade, he felt that word forgiven and believed it. He thought of his son, the boy's laugh echoing in the valley. The way he used to chase the horses, always a step too slow. Jack had spent years trying to forget that sound, afraid it would break him. But now remembering it didn't hurt. It healed. He looked up at the sky, vast, blue, endless. Somewhere beyond it, he hoped the boy could see him now. Maybe he'd even smile at the old man who finally stopped running. "Guess I did something right after all," he said softly. Inside the cabin, the fire crackled again. He rose, stepped inside, and added another log. The flame caught instantly, flaring bright, the light dancing across the walls. The same walls that had once echoed only loneliness now glowed with life. Jack crouched beside the hearth, holding his hands near the warmth. "This old heart ain't done yet," he whispered. "Not while there's fire left in it." He stayed there until the flame settled into a steady burn, then went back to the porch. The valley stretched out before him, wide and glimmering. The snowfields shimmered under the sunlight, dotted with deer moving quietly through the thawing pines. He sat down again, boots creaking, and looked at the carving once more. His eyes softened. The forest seemed to hum with quiet approval. The wind passed through the trees, stirring the air just enough to make the silver feather flutter. It shimmered a brief flash of light, then stillness. Jack took a deep breath, and then he whispered half to the woods, half to himself, "Thank you for bringing me back." The forest answered in its own language, a long sigh through the branches, soft eternal. Jack closed his eyes. The warmth of the sun touched his face. The sound of the forest lulled his heartbeat into rhythm. Peace. Real, deep, endless peace. He smiled, not the tired, hollow kind he used to wear, but the quiet smile of a man who finally made his peace with the world. Somewhere beyond the tree line, a whisper rolled through the valley, a deep, distant call carried by the wind. He recognized it instantly. It was them, saying goodbye. Or maybe, thank you. Jack chuckled softly, eyes still closed. "Anytime, friend. Anytime." The breeze faded. The forest grew still once more. Jack Callahan sat alone on his porch, the token resting beside him, the carving gleaming at his feet. He watched the last snow drift down from the branches, melting before it touched the ground. Inside the cabin, the fire burned bright, a small, steady flame like the heart of a man reborn. And as the sun climbed high over the Montana hills, the rancher whispered his final vow, a promise carried not in words, but in silence. No matter how wild the world gets, my heart will stay kind. The sun climbed higher over the Montana valley, spilling gold across the snow. From above, the little cabin stood alone among the pines, smoke curling gently from its chimney, glowing like a heartbeat against the white. The camera drifts back slow and wide, the world opening around it, endless mountains, quiet streams, the hush of a land that remembers everything and forgives in silence. Jack Callahan sat on the porch hat, tipped low, the token resting beside him. The light touched his face, soft and warm, and in that moment, he no longer looked like a man haunted by ghosts, but a man reborn by grace. A calm voice breaks through the stillness. Sometimes the wild doesn't test you to break you. It comes to remind you still have a heart. The sound fades into the wind. The forest hums its slow hymn again, ancient and kind. The light deepens, not bright, not harsh, just enough to hold you there between dream and waking. And as the camera pulls farther away, the rancher becomes smaller, quieter, until all that remains is the golden cabin, glowing like a lantern in the snow. Rancher Wild West, Stories, the only channel that blends cinematic Western ancient legends and healing emotion, where every tale begins with loneliness and ends with light. If this story touched your heart tonight, don't forget to comment where you're listening from and rate it from 0 to 10 before you fall asleep under the stars. Let the fire burn low, let the wild be gentle, and may your dreams be peaceful.